I want my group to be limitless. Simple as that. So that's why for me, they every day they try to answer and they try to respond about this because like I told them, this is something that I want from all my players and they're able to do it, all of them.
Wilfried Nancy and the Columbus Crew are who we're talking about today. But in order to actually learn how they're doing what they're doing, how they're scoring 17 goals in 7 matches, we need to start in a weird place. And that weird place is with the worst team in Major League Soccer this season, the Montreal Impact. Boo! I promise this will make sense all down the line about the tactics and coaching style of Wilfried Nancy. But right now we're down in the gutters of Major League Soccer in Montreal, one of the worst teams this season, and not only are they vying for the wooden spoon, but I would even argue relative to the amount of talent in the rest of the league, Montreal this season might be one of the worst teams in MLS ever. But it wasn't always like that. Only a few short months ago, they came in second place in the Eastern Conference, made the playoffs. We need to start here because this is a consistent thread with Wilfried Nancy, that he is able to change the character of teams, that he is able to bring joy and happiness to the club and the fans. And when we look at the roster and the availability of players for Montreal, it's basically the same team as last season, the same one that finished in second place under Wilfried Nancy. If we go 1 year prior to Nancy taking over Montreal, we get to the Thierry Henry era with Montreal Impact, and Thierry Henry brought Montreal into the playoffs in the 10th position in the Eastern Conference. And to be fair to Thierry Henry, Montreal was within the COVID protocols, so they didn't have a lot of home games, but at the same time, again, not a lot of turnover from their roster. 10th place with Thierry Henry, second place and a record number of points with Wilfried Nancy, and now in last place in 2023. Because Montreal made the playoffs last season, Wilfried Nancy's contract was automatically extended with Montreal, but Columbus was able to swoop in, and for some reason, Montreal allowed Wilfried Nancy to go to Ohio. Columbus did pay a fee to be able to negotiate with Wilfried Nancy and get him over to the black and gold. And on one hand, that seems like a really horrible decision by Montreal and an incredible investment by Columbus Crew. That investment is now paying off because Nancy has not only been able to get his team playing in the way he wants them to immediately, he's scoring loads of goals, 17 goals in 7 games for Columbus. And Columbus is able to do this because Wilfried Nancy has put in the time and effort to focus on building relationships with his players. These relationships emphasize trust, responsibility, communication, all of these things that are important in interpersonal relationships, but even more critical on the pitch. I think one other interesting thing to note is that throughout all of the clubs that he has coached at, empathy has been a prevailing character trait, not just for Nancy, but for his teams and the way that they show empathy towards each other. We'll go to this later because of the way that they play, but because of the trust that they have to hold the ball longer, to keep possession, they need to have empathy for each other when they make mistakes. Now, the coaching style on the field, the tactics and the strategy that we're going to talk about today is focused around a possession style that attacks from side to side, stretches the defenses and completely disorganizes them with the speed at which they play these long switches. Nancy is able to use a 3-4-3 formation. Nancy's style does use some tactical wrinkles that go against the best thinking in current modern football times. The output of all of this is that he has very expressive wingbacks. He has 2 center midfielders that we will talk about in Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe that are completely dominating Major League Soccer, and versatile attacking lines that can play in every single position. Did you need me, babe? Okay. Now let's talk about where the midfielders actually play, because in a 3-4-3, you would expect that Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe, the center midfielders for this team, are going to be plastered in the center of the pitch to make sure that they are taking up that space. But that's not the case. Now, a normal pivot role for someone like Aiden Morris playing a more defensive midfielder role is going to be just in front or between and splitting the 2 center backs. Columbus saw this with Greg Berhalter when he was the manager and the way that he used Will Trapp to drop between the center backs. But with Nancy and Aiden Morris, he is taking up the spaces that you would maybe see an inverted fullback. The pivot here is actually taking up the space between the center back and the fullback and this allows the wingbacks on the team to stretch the space and get very far up the pitch. The other key to this attacking strategy is condensing the field as small as possible to play in small triangles and really bait and provoke the opposing press to open up space. We see this a lot with the Columbus Crew defenders, and they take their time, sometimes almost meandering with the ball, and you think that it's not for a purpose, but really what they're trying to do is make sure that the opponent's front line and the opponent's press starts to creep up and starts to creep out of the spaces that they're trying to defend. And this allows the space to open up for Columbus to almost create an artificial counterattack, an artificial transition. When they're able to do this and the opponents are either out of position or have opened up space, Columbus makes huge switches of play to the other side of the field with long passes that disorganize the defense. These big switches also allow Columbus's attackers to run at the defending goal while the defenders are also running in the same direction, and this always makes it more difficult to defend. We mentioned Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe playing critical roles in this system. They're able to control those midfield spaces, but even more importantly for the system, sometimes they bunch up with their team near the sidelines. Darlington Nagbe and Aiden Morris, while they are center midfielders, are sometimes only a few yards apart while they're trying to use those wide spaces. Now we're about to see this unfold on the pitch and how they score these goals. But one last piece to this team's success is to instill joy, bravery, and movement in his players. When he moved to Montreal in 2005, he said he came with only a backpack. And this quote always stuck out to me is, "I have my conviction and I try to transmit that to my players. To be brave, to be bold, to enjoy what we do and to entertain. Because this is our job, to entertain people." So let's take all of this together and see how it manifests itself on the pitch. Take the second goal against DC United, for example. Sands makes a huge switch and the defense is completely disorganized in getting back. Christian Ramirez is able to take the space between the defenders, and we see this time and time again throughout these 17 goals. Columbus loves to swing it wide, bring it from the sideline into the center of the box for their goals. I think there is no better goal to show Nancy's ideas than Aiden Morris's first goal in MLS. This goal seems like it was thought up by Wilfried Nancy and put into motion in real life. The defenders for Columbus are tempting the pressing team to open up space. Columbus then uses their midfielders to take the wide lanes and make a big switch of play to disorganize and shift the defense. Allowing your players freedom of movement and to get into danger areas unmarked and to be brave in your choices allowed Columbus not only to get into the spaces here, but also for Zelarayan to have the flair to backheel it to Aiden Morris for the goal. We see it again and again for Columbus's 17 goals. Make a big switch of play, get the ball wide, swing it into the box and into the center danger areas for the goal. Now there is one drawback that I want to talk about for the way that Columbus plays bravely, and we saw it against DC, so we're going to look at it here. The brave defensive positioning for Columbus makes it so that if the other team is allowed to connect one pass out of the press, they get so much space to run into, and counterattacks are extremely dangerous. DC wasn't able to put any of these away, but that is where the space and the opportunity is available for the teams playing against Columbus. We need to hammer this point home because players over and over again, with every single team that he's coached with, have talked about how Nancy is approachable, empathetic, and committed to their individual success. Piet with Montreal said he's not just a coach, he's someone who's really invested in his players and in the team. Eric Hurtado, also with Montreal Impact, said, "He understands me as a player and as a person. He's been able to help me find my strengths and put me in the positions to be successful." Aiden Morris, talking after the 4-0 victory against Real Salt Lake, said of this Columbus Crew team, "It's a collective effort, and that's what makes us such a force to be reckoned with." I think the most fun thing about all of this is that Wilfried Nancy is not trying to have the output of all of this be to win every single match. His ultimate goal is to bring joy and happiness to the fans and the club. An outcome of playing with joy and playing with happiness is hopefully getting many, many victories. This philosophy has seen him be successful at every youth level for Montreal. It saw him get a record number of points with the senior team in Montreal in 2022. And so far this season, his Columbus Crew team is scoring 2.7 goals per game. I really think this guy is the next big thing to come out of Major League Soccer. That's it for today. Thank you so much everyone for watching. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel because that lets me know to make more content like this in the future. And if you are interested in seeing another Major League Soccer team breaking records in their first season in the league, make sure to watch this video next.